Have you ever wondered how a single moment of courage can change the course of history? How one woman's wisdom could save hundreds of lives and alter the destiny of a future king? Today, we're going to explore one of the most powerful yet overlooked stories in the Bible. It's a story about a woman whose name meant Father's Joy, but whose life was anything but joyful until one night when everything changed. Picture this: a wealthy household on the brink of destruction. Armed warriors marching through the darkness, their swords gleaming in the moonlight, ready to kill every man they encounter. And standing between life and death, between massacre and mercy, is one remarkable woman named Abigail. Her story will leave you amazed at how God can use anyone, anywhere, to change the world. Abigail. In ancient Hebrew, this beautiful name means the Father's Joy. Names in biblical times weren't just labels. They carried deep meaning and often reflected a person's character or destiny. But despite having such a beautiful name, Abigail's life was far from the joy her name suggested. The Bible tells us in 1 Samuel chapter 25 that Abigail was a woman of remarkable intelligence and beauty. But here's where her story becomes heartbreaking. She was married to a man who was her complete opposite in every way. While she was wise, he was foolish. While she was kind, he was cruel. While she thought before acting, he acted without thinking at all. Her husband's name was Nabal, and if you think that's an unfortunate name, you're absolutely right. In Hebrew, Nabal literally means fool. Can you imagine being given a name that means foolish or stupid? But here's the tragic part. Nabal didn't just have an unfortunate name. He lived up to it in every possible way. Nabal was incredibly wealthy. He owned 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, making him one of the richest men in the region. But despite all his money and possessions, he lacked the most important thing of all: wisdom. The Bible describes him as harsh and evil in his dealings with others. He was arrogant, selfish, and completely blind to how his actions affected those around him. Now, you might be wondering, how did a wise and beautiful woman like Abigail end up married to such a terrible man? In those days, marriages were usually arranged, especially among wealthy families. Women had very little say in who they married. It's very likely that Abigail's father, seeing Nabal's great wealth, thought he was securing his daughter's future. He probably had no idea he was actually sentencing her to a life of misery. But here's what's truly remarkable about Abigail's character. The Bible never records her complaining about her situation. There's no mention of her being bitter or angry about her fate. Instead, we see a woman who, despite being trapped in a difficult marriage, carried herself with dignity and grace. She managed her household wisely and became known throughout the region for her understanding and good judgment. While Nabal spent his days indulging in his wealth and making poor decisions, it was actually Abigail who kept their household running smoothly. She managed the servants, handled the daily operations, and made sure everything functioned properly. This explains why, when disaster was about to strike, the servants trusted her more than their own master. During this time, there was a young man named David living in the wilderness with his followers. You might know David as the future king of Israel, the man who killed the giant Goliath, the one who wrote many of the Psalms. But at this point in his life, David was running from King Saul, who was trying to kill him out of jealousy. David and his men had been living in the hills near Nabal's property, and here's something beautiful: they had been protecting Nabal's shepherds and flocks from raiders and wild animals. Without David's men providing this protection, Nabal's sheep and goats could have been stolen or killed. It was an unspoken agreement. David's men provided security, and in return, they expected some kindness and provision. The time came for sheep shearing, which was like a harvest festival in those days. It was a time of celebration and joy, when wealthy landowners would traditionally show generosity to those who had helped them throughout the year. This was the perfect opportunity for David to approach Nabal and ask for some food and supplies for his men. David chose 10 of his best men and sent them to Nabal with a respectful message. The message was polite and humble. Peace be to you, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have." David wasn't demanding anything. He was simply asking for some food and drink to help sustain his men who had been protecting Nabal's property. But Nabal's response was shocking. Instead of showing gratitude, he responded with mockery and insult. He sneered at David's men and said, "Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants these days who are breaking away from their masters." These words were not just disrespectful, they were incredibly dangerous. By pretending not to know who David was, Nabal was dismissing the very man whom many in Israel already recognized as God's chosen future king. Then, to make matters worse, Nabal accused David of being nothing more than a runaway servant. This was the worst possible insult Nabal could have given. David had been anointed by the prophet Samuel, had defeated Goliath, had served King Saul faithfully, and had done nothing but protect Nabal's property. Yet Nabal treated him like a common criminal. When David's men returned with Nabal's insulting message, something inside David snapped. This wasn't just an insult, it was a public humiliation. David had faced giants, armies, and betrayal, but this level of disrespect could not be ignored. Without hesitation, David gave a command that would have changed history forever. Every man strap on his sword. 400 of David's best warriors armed themselves and began marching toward Nabal's estate. David's intention was crystal clear. Not one male in Nabal's household would be left alive by morning. Meanwhile, Nabal had returned to his house and was feasting as if nothing had happened. He had no idea that his foolish words had just signed the death warrant for every man in his household. But one of the servants had witnessed everything, and he understood the gravity of the situation. This servant knew that Nabal was too stubborn and proud to listen to reason. So instead of going to his master, he ran to the one person who might be able to do something about it, Abigail. The servant quickly explained to Abigail what had happened. He told her about David's men protecting their flocks, about the insulting message Nabal had sent, and about the armed warriors who were now marching toward their home with murder in their hearts. "David's men were very good to us," the servant explained. "They were like a wall of protection around us and our sheep. But now our master has insulted them terribly, and disaster is hanging over our entire household." Time was running out. The servant estimated that David and his men would arrive before dawn. If something wasn't done immediately, by sunrise their home would be nothing but ashes and bloodstains. The weight of this news must have been crushing for Abigail. Her husband's foolishness had put everyone she cared about in mortal danger. But instead of panicking or falling apart, Abigail did something remarkable. She took action. With the precision of someone who was used to managing a large household, Abigail immediately began gathering supplies. She commanded her servants to prepare 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 prepared sheep, roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs. She had everything loaded onto donkeys. This wasn't just a gift, it was an offering of peace. But what Abigail did next was even more shocking for a woman in her time and culture. She left without telling her husband. In a society where women were expected to be silent and obedient, Abigail chose courage over convention. She understood something that her husband could never grasp. David wasn't just any ordinary man. He was God's chosen one, the future king of Israel. To oppose him was to oppose God's plan itself. As Abigail rode through the night, her heart must have been pounding. She could see them now, 400 armed warriors descending down the hillside, their faces hard with vengeance, their swords reflecting the light of their torches. David himself was leading the charge, his expression dark with righteous anger. As the two groups approached each other, Abigail did something that no noble woman would ever dare to do. She dismounted her donkey and fell face down on the ground before David. This wasn't just an act of submission, it was a desperate plea for mercy. With dust clinging to her clothes and fear in her heart, Abigail raised her voice and spoke words that would change the course of history. "My lord, let the blame be on me alone. David, who had been gripping his sword tightly, suddenly hesitated. This was not what he had expected at all. Abigail continued speaking, her voice steady despite the danger surrounding her. She acknowledged her husband's foolishness without trying to defend him. "Please do not let my lord pay attention to this wicked man, Nabal. He is just like his name means fool, and folly goes with him." But then Abigail did something truly brilliant. Instead of just asking for mercy, she spoke to David about his destiny and his calling. She reminded him of who he really was and what God had planned for his life. "The Lord will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my lord," she said, "because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live." These weren't just flattering words, they were a powerful reminder. Abigail was telling David that he was a man after God's own heart, a future king who didn't need to stain his hands with unnecessary bloodshed. Then, with incredible wisdom, she gave him a warning that would save his conscience. "When the Lord has fulfilled for my lord every good thing he promised, you will not have on your conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed." Something amazing happened in that moment. David, who had been consumed with anger and thoughts of revenge, suddenly stopped. His breathing slowed. His grip on his sword loosened. Abigail had done the impossible. She had turned away the wrath of a mighty warrior and reminded a future king of his true calling. David was so moved by her words that he praised God for sending her to him. "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me," he said. "May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day." In one bold act of courage, Abigail had accomplished something extraordinary. She had stopped a massacre, saved innocent lives, and redirected a future king back to his divine purpose. But her night wasn't over yet. She still had to return home and face her husband. Abigail rode back to her estate with mixed emotions. She had saved her household and accomplished something miraculous, but she knew that Nabal still had to face the consequences of his actions. When she arrived home, she found her husband exactly where she had left him, feasting and drinking like a king, completely unaware that he had nearly died that night. The entire household was celebrating, with wine flowing freely and servants bustling about. Nabal was so drunk that Abigail knew there was no point in trying to reason with him. So she waited. She waited until morning, when the wine had worn off and his mind was clear. Then, calmly and carefully, she told him everything that had happened. She explained how David's men had been protecting their flocks, how his insulting message had enraged David, how 400 armed warriors had been marching toward their home with murder in their hearts, and how she had intervened to save everyone's life. As Abigail spoke, the color drained from Nabal's face. He stood frozen in place, his body rigid with shock. The full weight of what he had done, and what had almost happened, hit him like a physical blow. The Bible describes what happened next in chilling detail. His heart failed him, and he became like a stone. Some scholars believe he suffered a stroke. Others think it was sheer terror that overwhelmed him. Either way, Nabal became like a paralyzed man, unable to move or speak. For 10 long days, he lingered in this condition, neither fully alive nor dead. Then, the Bible tells us, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When news of Nabal's death reached David, his reaction wasn't one of personal satisfaction, but of reverence for God's justice. "Praise be to the Lord," he said, "who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt." David recognized that vengeance belonged to God alone. His hands had remained clean, and divine justice had been served. But then something wonderful happened. David sent messengers to Abigail, not just to thank her, but to ask her to become his wife. The woman who had once been married to a fool was now being invited to become the wife of a future king. Without hesitation, Abigail accepted. She quickly prepared for the journey, gathering her belongings and her servants. This time, she wasn't riding in desperation through the night. She was traveling in joy toward a new life filled with hope and purpose. Abigail's new life with David wasn't without its challenges. David was constantly on the move, fleeing from King Saul and facing battle after battle. Being married to him meant living in war camps, facing danger, and dealing with uncertainty. But Abigail never complained. She had chosen this path because she believed in God's plan for David's life. During one particularly difficult period, tragedy struck again. While David and his men were away, raiders attacked their camp and took all the women and children captive, including Abigail. For a moment, it seemed like her story might end in devastation. But David, with God's guidance, pursued the raiders and rescued everyone, including his beloved wife. It was a powerful moment. The woman who had once saved David was now saved by him. As the years passed and David finally became king, Abigail's name remained a testament to wisdom and courage. Her influence on David's life was undeniable. She had shown him that wisdom and discernment could change the course of history, that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from fighting, but from choosing peace. Abigail's story teaches us so many important lessons. First, it shows us the power of wisdom over foolishness. While her husband reacted with pride and anger, Abigail responded with humility and understanding. She knew when to speak and when to act, and her wisdom saved lives. Second, her story demonstrates the importance of courage in the face of danger. When everyone else was paralyzed by fear, Abigail took action. She didn't wait for someone else to solve the problem. She stepped up and did what needed to be done. Third, Abigail's story shows us how God can use anyone, anywhere, to accomplish His purposes. She wasn't a prophet or a priest or a mighty warrior. She was just a woman trapped in a difficult marriage. But when the moment came, God used her to change the course of history. Finally, her story reminds us that our current circumstances don't define our future. Abigail began as the wife of a fool, but she became the wife of a king. Her wisdom and faithfulness opened doors she never could have imagined. Perhaps the most amazing thing about Abigail's story is how one moment of courage changed everything. In a single night, she went from being a victim of her husband's foolishness to being the hero who saved her entire household. Her willingness to act when others were paralyzed by fear made all the difference. How many times in our own lives do we face moments like this? Moments when we have the choice to act with wisdom or remain silent, to step forward with courage or step back in fear. Abigail's story challenges us to be ready for these moments and to trust that God can use our obedience to accomplish incredible things. Her legacy reminds us that we don't have to be perfect to be used by God. We don't have to have all the answers or be in ideal circumstances. We just need to be willing to step out in faith when the moment calls for it. Abigail's story is one of the most powerful examples of wisdom, courage, and faith in action that we find in the Bible. She shows us that one person, acting with wisdom and courage, can change the course of history. Her bold act of intervention didn't just save lives, it reminded a future king of his true calling and changed the trajectory of an entire nation. If this incredible story has inspired you today, I'd love for you to show your support by hitting that like button below. Your likes help more people discover these amazing biblical stories that can change their lives. And if you have already, please subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest videos exploring the hidden gems of Scripture. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments below. What was your favorite lesson from Abigail's story? Have you ever faced a moment when you had to choose between fear and courage? How did this story speak to your heart today? Your comments and insights help build our community and encourage others who are on their own journey of faith. Remember, just like Abigail, God has equipped you with wisdom and courage for the moments that matter most. He can use your obedience to change lives and accomplish His purposes in ways you never imagined. Trust in His plan, step out in faith, and watch how He can turn your trials into triumphs. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next video as we continue exploring the incredible stories of faith that have shaped our world. Until then, may God bless you and keep you, and may you walk in the wisdom and courage of Abigail.